What if the foods you buy every single week suddenly become so expensive that your monthly grocery budget no longer makes sense? And what if some of those price increases are already building behind the scenes right now? Imagine walking into a store this summer and discovering that several familiar products cost far more than they did just months earlier. Before we get into the details, I want to hear from you, so comment below and tell us which grocery item has increased the most in your area. And if you appreciate research-based content that helps you stay informed about important consumer trends, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss future updates. Over the past few years, shoppers have become increasingly aware that food prices can change quickly. And while some categories have stabilized after earlier inflation spikes, others continue facing significant pressure from production costs. Transportation expenses, weather-related disruptions, labor shortages, and global supply challenges. Today, we are looking at 7 foods that analysts, retailers, and market observers continue watching closely because they remain vulnerable to higher prices if current trends persist. The first item on the list is frozen seafood, a category that many families rely on because of its convenience, long shelf life, and versatility. However, frozen seafood often depends on a complicated international supply chain. Fish may be harvested in one region, processed in another, packaged elsewhere, and then transported thousands of miles before reaching store shelves. Every step in that journey carries costs, including fuel, refrigeration, labor, storage, and shipping. When transportation becomes more expensive or supply becomes tighter, consumers frequently see higher prices at the checkout counter. The second food attracting attention is breakfast cereal. At first glance, cereal seems like a simple grocery product. But behind every box is a long chain involving grain production, manufacturing facilities, packaging suppliers, trucking networks, and retail distribution systems. Weather conditions affecting grain harvests, higher fertilizer costs, increased energy expenses, and packaging costs can all influence the final price consumers pay. Even relatively small increases across several stages of production can add up and create noticeable changes on store shelves. Another category facing ongoing pressure is orange juice. Citrus growers in some major producing regions have dealt with disease challenges, changing weather patterns, and lower production levels in recent years. When fewer oranges are available, processors must compete for supply, and that competition can contribute to higher costs. Consumers have already seen substantial increases in orange juice prices compared to historical levels, and many industry observers continue monitoring citrus production closely. Olive oil is another product that has drawn global attention. In several major olive-producing regions, drought conditions and reduced harvests have limited supply, while demand has remained relatively strong. Whenever supply declines and demand stays steady, prices often move higher. This has made olive oil one of the most discussed grocery items among consumers looking for value and affordability. Ground beef also remains under scrutiny because cattle supplies have been tighter than normal in recent years. Raising cattle requires significant time, land, feed, and resources, which means rebuilding supply is not a rapid process. As a result, any imbalance between supply and demand can place upward pressure on prices. For many households, ground beef is a staple ingredient used in numerous meals throughout the week, making any increase especially noticeable. Eggs continue to be another important category to watch. While prices have experienced periods of improvement following earlier disruptions, egg markets remain sensitive to production challenges. Finally, coffee rounds out the list. Coffee production depends heavily on weather conditions in key growing regions around the world, and disruptions caused by drought, excessive rainfall, disease, or transportation problems can influence supply levels. Since millions of people start their day with coffee, even modest production concerns can attract significant attention from both consumers and retailers. The important question is why these particular foods continue appearing in discussions about future grocery costs while thousands of other products receive far less attention? The answer lies in the fact that each of these foods depends on supply chains that are facing multiple forms of pressure at the same time. In many cases, it is not a single problem driving costs higher, but rather a combination of factors working together. Take frozen seafood as an example. Beyond transportation expenses, seafood producers must deal with fuel prices, labor availability, environmental regulations, storage requirements, processing costs, and changing fishing conditions. If harvest volumes decline while demand remains stable, suppliers often face difficult decisions about inventory allocation and pricing. The result is that consumers may notice gradual increases over time, rather than one dramatic jump. Coffee follows a similar pattern. Many of the world's most important coffee-growing regions are vulnerable to unpredictable weather. Excessive rainfall can damage crops, drought can reduce yields, and plant diseases can create additional challenges for producers. Since coffee trees require time to mature and recover, production problems cannot always be solved quickly. This means that temporary disruptions can sometimes influence supply for longer periods than consumers expect. Ground beef represents another interesting case because cattle production operates on a much longer timeline than many other food categories. Ranchers cannot instantly increase herd sizes in response to higher demand. Expanding production requires time, investment, feed resources, and favorable conditions. If drought affects grazing land or feed becomes more expensive, producers may face additional financial pressure. These realities help explain why beef prices often remain sensitive to changes in supply levels. Eggs provide a different example of market vulnerability. Consumers often think of eggs as a basic and stable grocery item. Yet production systems can be affected by disease outbreaks, feed costs, labor expenses, transportation challenges, and changing demand patterns. When disruptions occur, prices can respond rapidly because eggs are purchased regularly by millions of households. Orange juice demonstrates how agricultural challenges can directly affect consumer prices. Citrus growers have spent years dealing with issues ranging from plant diseases to weather-related setbacks. When production declines, processors must work with reduced supply, and that situation can place upward pressure on costs throughout the market. Olive oil has faced similar concerns in several major producing regions where prolonged dry conditions have affected harvests. Because olive trees take years to reach full productivity, supply shortages cannot always be corrected quickly. This creates a situation where lower production can influence prices for extended periods. Breakfast cereal may seem less vulnerable than agricultural products, such as beef or oranges, but cereal manufacturers depend on grains, packaging materials, energy, transportation, and labor. If costs rise across multiple areas simultaneously, the impact eventually reaches store shelves. Another factor that often goes unnoticed is the role of energy prices throughout the food system. Energy is required for farming equipment, food processing facilities, refrigerated storage, transportation networks, and retail operations. When energy costs increase, those expenses can affect numerous stages of production and distribution. Transportation remains especially important because modern food systems rely heavily on trucks, ships, rail networks, and warehouses to move products efficiently. Even a modest increase in transportation costs can influence final pricing when multiplied across millions of products. Despite these concerns, experts generally emphasize the importance of staying informed rather than reacting emotionally. Markets are constantly changing, and forecasts do not guarantee future outcomes. Some categories may experience relief if production improves, weather conditions become more favorable, or supply chains operate more efficiently. However, the reason these 7 foods continue attracting attention is that they remain connected to several ongoing challenges at once. Understanding those challenges allows consumers to make informed decisions instead of being caught off guard by potential changes in grocery costs during the months ahead. As we bring everything together, it becomes clear that the story behind rising food prices is much larger than any single product or any single event. The grocery store has become a reflection of countless factors working simultaneously across local, national, and global markets. Weather conditions influence harvests. Transportation networks affect delivery costs. Energy prices shape production expenses. Labor availability impacts efficiency. And consumer demand determines how quickly products move through the supply chain. When several of these factors experience pressure at the same time, certain food categories become especially vulnerable to higher prices. That is why frozen seafood, cereal, orange juice, olive oil, ground beef, eggs, and coffee continue receiving attention from industry analysts and market observers. Each category faces its own unique challenges, but all share one common characteristic. They depend on systems that remain sensitive to disruption. What makes this situation particularly important for families is that these are not luxury products purchased once or twice a year. They are everyday items that appear regularly in household budgets. A small increase in the cost of coffee may seem manageable on its own, but when coffee becomes more expensive at the same time that beef, eggs, seafood, and other staples rise as well, the combined effect can become much more noticeable. This is why many consumers feel that grocery bills are changing faster than expected, even when individual price increases appear relatively modest. Another important lesson from recent years is that food markets rarely move in perfectly predictable ways. Some forecasts turn out to be accurate, while others change as new information becomes available. Favorable weather can improve harvests. Transportation networks can become more efficient. Production can recover, and supply shortages can ease. At the same time, unexpected events can emerge without warning and create new challenges for producers and retailers. This uncertainty is one reason why experts focus on trends rather than guarantees. The goal is not to predict exact prices months in advance, but to identify categories where risks remain elevated compared to others. Consumers who understand these trends often feel better prepared because they know what factors to watch, rather than being surprised by every market change. Many households have already adapted by comparing prices more carefully, planning meals in advance, reducing unnecessary food waste, taking advantage of discounts when available, and paying closer attention to value than they did in the past. These habits may seem simple, but over time, they can help families navigate periods of higher grocery costs more effectively. It is also worth remembering that awareness and preparation are very different from panic. Making informed decisions based on reliable information is generally more useful than reacting to rumors or alarming headlines. Food markets are dynamic, and conditions can improve just as quickly as they can worsen. The key takeaway from today's discussion is that several widely used grocery products continue facing pressures related to supply, production, transportation, climate conditions, and operating costs. Whether those pressures result in dramatic increases, moderate increases, or eventual stabilization will depend on how these factors develop in the months ahead. What remains certain is that consumers who stay informed are in a stronger position to understand what is happening and why. If you found this information helpful, now is the perfect time to join the conversation. Leave a comment below and tell us which of these 7 foods you purchase most often and whether you have already noticed higher prices in your local stores. Your experience may help other viewers understand what is happening in different areas. Also, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss future updates on consumer trends, grocery prices, and important developments that could affect household budgets in the months ahead. Thank you for watching, and we look forward to hearing your thoughts in the comments section below.